The Edmonton Oilers went from playoff team to Stanley Cup contender in 2 quick moves. On today's edition of Locked On Oilers, can they recapture that magic?
You are Locked On Oilers, your daily podcast on the Edmonton Oilers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this Tuesday edition of Locked On Oilers. I am your host, Nick Zararis. This upcoming October will be my 4th season as a host on the Locked On Podcast Network, and I want to thank everyone that is making Locked On Oilers their first listen of the day. Locked On Oilers is a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where we've got your team covered every day, and today's show is brought to you by our friends at Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year subscription. On today's show, we are going to walk through how the Oilers became Stanley Cup contenders in 2 moves: the trade from Mattias Ekholm and the free agent signing of Zach Hyman. We're going to break down each of those signings, those transactions. So we're going to start first segment, Zach Hyman. Second segment, we'll pivot to Ekholm. Then in our final segment, we'll open up a little more broadly, talk about why these moves in particular worked well, what the Oilers can learn, and what they can hope to apply going forward. So the first thing we got to talk about, anytime we are talking about a transaction, acquiring a player, what is the fit? How does the environment impact the player? Because as we all know, as everybody who is as tapped into hockey as you need to be listening to a podcast episode in the dead of August when there's no news other than Leon, Connor, and the significant others all being on a group, not bachelor party. What's it called? You can tell I don't have any friends who are married yet. Honeymoon. There we go. A group honeymoon. That's the latest in Oilers news I've got for you, is the 2 McDavid, Draisaitl, Celeste, and Lauren Kyle all being on a group honeymoon. That's all we got. But if you're listening to this episode right now, you're probably pretty in the weeds as far as hockey goes. And what I mean by environment, the vast majority of hockey players, hell, even the great hockey players, can only do so much in the context of their environment. We had that very in-depth episode last week where we broke down why winning can't be the be-all, end-all in a team sport, because as great as Connor and Leon are, they can only do so much. Those are 2 guys on an 18-skater team. You got your 2 goalies as well. And even the all-time greats can only do so much in their respective environments. And look, Connor and Leon do a tremendous job of rising the tide for all boats with their play. There are very few guys in the entire sport who are as capable of elevating the talent around them as Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl. But you do need to give those guys reinforcements. You do need to augment your superstars with quality upper echelon talent. And the salary cap makes that difficult. Having a draft makes that difficult. There are so many circumstantial factors that are designed to make good teams worse, to try and maintain some semblance of a competitive balance. And that forces you to be resourceful. That forces you to be creative. A lot of NHL general managers, a lot of front offices, they lack the capacity to find opportunities for growth. And that's really the key here. In the case of Zach Hyman, and that's who we're going to start with, this is a textbook example of growth opportunities. Now, was it a guarantee that Zach Hyman was going to work going from Toronto to Edmonton? No, it was not a guarantee. As we all know, anytime you go into free agency, anytime you dip your toes into the top of the market, and as we always discuss here on Locked On Oilers, the everydayers have heard me, I call it a free agency tax. You're always going to pay $1 million, $1.5 million more dollars per year for a player in unrestricted free agency than they're worth, because of the nature of hockey's free agency, because players get there so infrequently, because that's the first opportunity most guys get to really negotiate with their full bargaining power as unrestricted free agents. You got to remember, man, these guys get drafted 17, 18, 19 years old. Okay. You sign a 3-year ELC. That gets you to 21. You sign 1 or 2 RFA deals, whether you do the long one like Leon or you do the bridge like Bouchard. That'll get you to your mid-20s if you're Bouchard. And then if you're Evan Bouchard or that type of player, you sign a 2 or 3 year bridge. You sign another RFA deal at 24, 25, or 26, and that takes you to unrestricted free agency. And that's the first time you get to negotiate with other teams than the team that owns your rights, unless you get into the offer sheet weeds. But as we know, that's very infrequent. Prior to last year when Broberg and Holloway signed the dual offer sheets, Jesperi Kotkaniemi, and before that, I think it was Dustin Penner. So it's been a while. But guys go out there and try and get as much as they can. And I think it's fair to say Zach Hyman probably left a little meat on the bone as far as coming to the Oilers and the money he got. Now, prior to joining the Oilers, of course, Zach Hyman was a member of the Maple Leafs. He was playing 19 minutes a night in the 2 seasons prior to coming to the Oilers. But as you know, and we've done a number of Zach Hyman episodes. If you're an everydayer, we did one in October. We did one right before the playoffs. We did one a week or two ago, trying to forecast what he's going to end up with, trying to gauge where his stats are going to end up. And the biggest difference between his role in Toronto versus his role here in Edmonton is the utility. What are the teams asking him to do? In Toronto, he was playing a lot with Austin Matthews. He was playing a lot with Mitch Marner, with John Tavares, William Nylander. When you are playing with superstars, especially of the Austin Matthews variety who profile as goal scorers, you are not going to be inclined to shoot as much. And the numbers bear that out significantly. In 1 year, so the last year Zach Hyman was in Toronto, 2020-2021, he had 115 shots on goal. The next year, his first year in Edmonton, he had 213. He had 98 more shots on goal. Then the year after that, he had 276 in a 2-year window. Zach Hyman doubled the shots on goal opportunities he had year over year. He incrementally grew his minutes responsibility. Ultimately, this culminates in the 54-goal season where he is credited with 290 shots on goal in all situations, and that speaks volumes about what the Oilers are asking him to do. Of course, all situations you're factoring in how good the Oilers' power play is, and that is something to consider, and not all players are as specialized or as gifted to be able to apply their skill sets at power play, even strength, the way Hyman is. And make no mistake about it, Zach Hyman is an upper echelon player in the NHL. Now, I don't think anybody's going to misconstrue him as a consistent 50-goal guy. That's pretty much only been Alex Ovechkin. Steven Stamkos did it a couple times. David Pastrnak is probably capable of it. Leon could do it. But when we're talking about the scope of the NHL at large, we're talking about maybe 5 to 10 guys who have the ability to score 50 goals in a given season, depending on the environmental factors. Then you get down to the use and the importance. And it's important to look at it in the context of McDavid and Hyman because they overlap so much. So those two guys, over the last 3 regular seasons, there is a discernible difference when Zach Hyman is on the ice with McDavid versus when he is not. So when they're together, 60% of the scoring chances, 62% of the goals, 62% of the expected goals, 64% of the high danger chances, and they score on 11.37%. Now, when Hyman is not out there with McDavid, 54% of scoring chances, so 6% less, 5% less, excuse me. 43% expected goals, so an 18 percentage point swing. 7 fewer expected goals percentage, 9 fewer high danger chance percentage, and then 4 lower shooting percentage. So that tells you really important context that Hyman is on the ice with McDavid. They are creating dangerous offense from quality areas. They have the puck more than other teams. And most notably, and I do think it's important to note, when Zach Hyman's out there, he's forechecking his butt off. He is making sure the other team, even if the Oilers don't have the puck, he's making it so the other team has a harder time breaking out, of going from defense to offense. And you cannot overstate the value of that. And I do think it's a reasonable point to make that Zach Hyman being out was part of the reason the Oilers ultimately came up short in 6 games this year in the Stanley Cup final against the Florida Panthers. We're going to take our first break on today's edition of Locked On Oilers. When we come back, a Mattias Ekholm glazing session, and just frankly, an ode to how good this guy is, and frankly, why he doesn't get enough credit, coming up next. Did you just realize your business needed to hire someone like yesterday? How can you find amazing candidates fast? It's so easy. Just use Indeed. When it comes to hiring, Indeed is all you need. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other sites. Indeed sponsored jobs put your post at the top of the page and help you reach the right candidates faster. We've all been in that spot where our team needs the right hire, like yesterday. The pressure's on, and every day is without the right person is a major setback, not just to you, but to your entire team. That's exactly when Indeed sponsored jobs come in handy to make sure your post is seen by the right candidates right now. And now you can speed up your hiring process with a $75 sponsored job credit. Just go to Indeed.com/lockedon right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring Indeed is all you need. Thank you to everyone who is hanging out on this Tuesday edition of Locked On Oilers, where we are talking about franchise shifting moves. And neither Mattias Ekholm nor Zach Hyman is what we would classify as a superstar. Neither of those guys is going to win a Hart Trophy, a Norris Trophy, a Conn Smythe. But this is the type of quality upper echelon roster depth you need if you are going to be a bona fide Stanley Cup contender. When push comes to shove and you are in the trenches of a conference final, of a Stanley Cup final, you need as little drop off from line to line as possible. And I cannot begin to emphasize how important the acquisition of Mattias Ekholm is, and frankly still is, in the elevation of the Oilers from playoff team to Stanley Cup contender. And it's multifaceted. Number one, most important, the acquisition of Mattias Ekholm enables Evan Bouchard to develop in the environment he does. If you're an everydayer of Locked On Oilers, you have heard me say over and over again that, in my personal opinion, environment matters almost as much as a player's individual talent. Are you playing a guy, a young player, with a partner or line mates that accentuate what makes them gifted? And in the case of Ekholm, he is so strong in the corners. He's great at winning pucks. He's an above average skater. He's got a strong stick. He's good at denying zone entries. You add all of that up, and it is the perfect yin and yang situation for Evan Bouchard. Bouchard, not the most physical, not the best as far as standing guys up at the line. Where Bouchard thrives is his opportunities to use his brain to outsmart players, use his positioning because he's not the best of skater. And then it's moving the puck. It's using that intuition to have an understanding of where guys are on the ice and using that spacing to his advantage to create dangerous offense, not just for himself, but for the other guys who are out there on the ice with him. And giving Bouchard Ekholm as a partner is the ideal composition of a defensive pair. You want the puck mover and the puck retriever. Of course, in an ideal world, you want guys who can do both. But because those are specialized skill sets, and frankly, because offensive defensemen are the ones who get paid, there is more of an impetus to be better at that. You are better off trying to skew all of your traits towards offense in the hopes that you get on the right team and you will get power play time. And if you put up a couple 50, 60-point seasons, you will hang around. As annoying as Tony DeAngelo is, as the number of teams, including a KHL team, all have given up at him at various points, the Islanders looked at him and said, he's better than what's in the AHL. We'll give him a crack. And look, that's not an endorsement of Tony DeAngelo. He's a terrible defensive defenseman, can't play in his own end to save his life. But he's got enough skating ability and he's got enough puck skills that teams are willing to overlook the warts, willing to overlook the holes in his game. And that's what happens when you put an offense-first defenseman in an environment where his partner and, frankly, his team around him are not great defensively. And you think about Tony DeAngelo's development as a New York Ranger, playing on those David Quinn teams, not a lot of quality defensemen in terms of their defensive ability throughout the years, whether it was Mark Stahl, the end of Ryan McDonough, who didn't overlap with Tony DeAngelo for all of that long. But you need these offense-first guys to have competent partners who accentuate their best traits. I think a great example, Charlie McAvoy and Zdeno Chara in Boston is one that really does come to mind as far as the ideal outcome there. McAvoy eventually outlasts Chara, grows up into that bigger role. I think there are bad versions of this as well. You saw the Canucks try this with Tyler Myers and Quinn Hughes, Philip Roenick to a lesser extent, though I don't think Roenick is as poor a player as Tyler Myers. You see what you're trying to do there as far as skill sets, as far as not overlapping skill sets to create more diversity in how guys play. And Mattias Ekholm, as a defense-first defenseman, with the skill set, he has found a way to make positive impacts and to bring out the best in Evan Bouchard. And as much as Bouchard is the one who's taken the significant leap from offense first, Noah Dobson-esque, to fringe top 5-10 defenseman in the world, at least in my opinion, and I know that's a controversial opinion. I know anytime a Panthers fan watches a video, they love to tell me how much I overrate him. Look, Evan Bouchard is one of the 10 best defensemen in the world over the last 3 years. You look at the playoff performances in particular, the numbers are there. And when you bear that out in conjunction with Mattias Ekholm's arrival and really enabling Evan Bouchard to take that leap, you cannot overstate how important it is to have that steady first pair that your coach feels good about throwing over the boards every 3 shifts, no matter what. The fact that these guys complement each other so well and do such a strong job of driving possession because of the way they play, it creates a real comforting feeling. And then you have the opportunity to double dip. You put your best defensive pair out there with the best player in the world, and you overlap McDavid and Bouchard and Ekholm, and you give them 20 to 22 minutes per night of outright game control. And you assume, by virtue of having those guys overlap with each other, you are going to control the minutes the majority of the time. And the more minutes you consistently control, the more likely you are to win. So in that world, I'm going to go on over to my note sheet here and just talk about Bouchard away and with Mattias Ekholm. So when they overlap, 59% of the scoring chances, 62% of the goals, 60% of the expected goals, 61% of the high danger chances, 10.10 shooting, and then 910 save percentage. When they are not together, when Evan Bouchard is out there without Ekholm, 2% fewer scoring chances, 13% fewer goals, that's a big swing, 3% fewer expected goals, 3% fewer high danger chances, 3% lower shooting percentage, and 21% lower save percentage. So if you add that picture up, that tells you when Bouchard is out there without Ekholm, the Oilers are playing more defense. That makes sense. Ekholm is great at denying zone entries, at playing transition defense. Evan Bouchard is not. Where Ekholm thrives are the areas where they don't necessarily show up in the box score. This is something I was talking about with one of my friends over the weekend. We were talking about why it's hard for defensive defensemen to get paid and why guys like Evan Bouchard, Noah Dobson, to a lesser extent Adam Fox, or a Quinn Hughes, offensively gifted guys get maligned for the defensive mistakes because those stick out. You think about how many times over the course of a game Evan Bouchard touches the puck, 200, 300. Just touches, just passes, retrieves, whatever. 200 times, we'll say, just as an estimate. Of those 200 puck touches, 2 are bad, 2 are good, and 190 of them are just another pass to another player that don't really stick in your mind. Because just a handful of plays determine these games, you're more likely to recall the good play or the bad play, and the average, what the majority of those plays are, they don't stick in your memory. So when you think about Evan Bouchard struggling, you don't think about, oh, well, he made all of those. No, he had the one bad turnover. They lost the game because of it. That's it. And that's just not an accurate reflection of everything that happens. And frankly, it's a testament to just how useful Mattias Ekholm is because he has such an outsized influence. We're talking about a 13% swing in goal share over a 3-year window. That's a significant number of games. It's more than 200 games. That's more than 2,000, 3,000 minutes of 5-on-5 ice time. That is a massive sample size to draw upon and gain understanding and know that those are relatively stable if those numbers bear out over such an extended period of time. We're going to take our second and final break on today's edition of Locked On Oilers. When we come back, I'm going to tell you what the Oilers can learn from moves like signing Zach Hyman and trading for Mattias Ekholm, coming up next. Most people can't name all their financial accounts or even what they're worth, whether it's their 401k, properties, investments, and if you don't have the full picture, you can end up leaving money on the table. That's why there's Monarch Money. It's an all-in-one personal finance tool that brings your entire financial life together in one clean, easy-to-use interface. on your laptop or phone. Monarch does the heavy lifting for you. You can link all of your accounts in minutes, see clear data visuals, get smart characterization of your spending, and finally feel in control of your money without ever opening a spreadsheet. I'm someone who has struggled at times to put money aside for big purchases, often needing to finance them and then paying back later after the fact. Monarch Money makes it so easy to set a goal, put money aside, and stay on target. Do not let financial opportunity slip through the cracks. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com in your browser for half off your first year subscription. One more time, because it's that good a deal. 50% off your first year subscription at monarchmoney.com with code LOCKEDONNHL. Thank you to everyone who is hanging out on this Tuesday edition of Locked On Oilers. So, programming note, tomorrow I will be leaving for a week-long vacation. There will be episodes this week on today, Tuesday, tomorrow, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. Of next week, there will be episodes on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and then Friday. Programming note, you have been forewarned. My goal is to maintain 4 episodes per week during this August period where we are in the dead of summer. Next week, we will do the all Connor McDavid team, and I've added some wrinkles to make it a little bit more challenging to not just let me assemble the best team possible. I'll give you more of an idea when we get later in the week and get closer to when those episodes are going to go live, but I've started doing the work. A lot of the math is already done. It's just simply a matter of how I want to break it up into various episodes. But one thing that's very eye-opening when you do that type of long-term research project, where we're talking about 10 NHL seasons now, Connor McDavid's played, a lot of the value, the Oilers are at a position now, at a time now, frankly, where they need to do whatever they can to maintain their window of contention. They need to put themselves in a position where they cannot really worry about the long-term future. And when Ken Holland made these moves, when he signed Zach Hyman in free agency, when he traded for Mattias Ekholm, he put chips in. And the Ekholm trade, you burn a first-round pick, that's a little rough. You trade away a prospect, that's a little rough. You sign Zach Hyman to a long-term free agent deal as a player who plays a physical, grueling style, who already has miles on the tread, someone who hasn't been on your team, hasn't been on your system. That's daunting. But what can the Oilers learn here? So number one, guys who play with superstars stick. If you are an effective player, and look, I'm not saying Zach Hyman is an Austin Matthews caliber player. He's not. But if you can play with those guys, if you can play with Marner, with Nylander, with Tavares, if you're a Mattias Ekholm and you can play with a Roman Josi or a Ryan Ellis or a PK Subban, you can play with Evan Bouchard. And that's the first component here. When you are playing with superstars, there really is an innate understanding required, because those guys process the game at such a ridiculously high level. They find ways to put themselves in positions that nobody else can see. That's what makes Connor great. The fact he can process the game so quick and get frankly, an understanding of where everyone is at the ice, basically at all times, it puts you at such an advantage. And not everybody is good enough to play with superstars. Not everybody has those baseline fundamentals down enough to be in the right place at the right time. That's the textbook definition of luck, is when preparation and opportunity converge at a singular point and you capitalize. And sometimes it's better to be lucky than good, because you go to the net front, good things happen. When you put yourself in a position to make things happen, it is such a good feeling. And that's one of those telltale signs that you're a good hockey team. Because even if you're not playing a great game and you're hanging around and all it takes is a bounce or two to get right back in the mix, that is the type of sign that you are dealing with a good team. Even when you're not at your best, you're still finding ways to win. Even when the game circumstances are pretty ugly and you still find ways to win. And that is one of the benefits of having 2 all-time great players in Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl on the same team. They can solve so many problems just on their own. On a nightly basis, the Oilers are going to go out there and against 15 to 25 of the given teams in the league on any given night, they're going to have enough talent just to win. Of course, as we all know, good talent doesn't beat hard work alone. You need to make sure that that talent works hard. But most nights, the Oilers are going to be in close games. You have the opportunity to roll Connor Leon Hyman in a pinch. You get that power play out there. Hopefully it's a little bit better this year, goes the other direction as opposed to down. And that's enough. And of course, when you get to the playoffs, that threshold rises. And if you're an everydayer, you heard me talk about it over and over again last year. Can the Oilers make incremental progress over the course of the season and put themselves in a position to unlock where they want to go? You need to make incremental progress over the course of the season because that's going to put you in a position to reach your ceiling. Your goal to win the Stanley Cup needs to be to maximize your ceiling. Playing for floor gets you in the playoffs. You maybe win a round if you're playing a team of comparable skill. But unless you understand the assignment, unless you can get to that highest possible plane, and that's what makes winning the Stanley Cup so challenging, that's what puts you in a position where you are going to go all the way. And I'm not saying the Oilers haven't tried. Trading for Jake Wallman, bringing in John Klingberg, those were swings. Going out and getting Corey Perry in free agency last year, that before the Stanley Cup final run in 23-24 when he was at league minimum. Same deal signing Evander Kane. Now, some of that is desperation. The Oilers don't have a lot of cap space. You sign the depressed assets who have the off-the-ice issues. That puts you in a position to capitalize on the fact that those guys want chances to win. You can't afford to pay them a whole lot, but because of their off-the-ice stuff, they're not going to command their full salary. And look, the biggest lesson here, if any, is that you need to understand how guys fit. And this is not a testament to how good Ken Holland is at evaluating pro personnel. As we all know, some of the decisions he made over the course of his tenure were mind-bogglingly frustrating. They weren't always the most based in logic. They weren't always the most rational decision when it comes to, does this make sense for where the NHL is and where it's going, as opposed to where it might have been a couple of years ago. I mean, there's no better example of that than the Ken Holland Youth Project, where so few guys he drafted during his tenure ultimately got to the NHL. And now some of that is just, as a Stanley Cup contender, you're not in the business of giving young guys opportunities. But for the Oilers to get where they want to go, to win a Stanley Cup, they're going to need more of these types of swings. I think Jake Wallman can be 80% of what that Mattias Ekholm acquisition was. I don't think Ike Howard is a 35, 40 goal guy yet. I think a lot of that is going to depend on environment and how he adapts to playing with Connor McDavid, playing with Leon Draisaitl. Could he eventually be your Hyman replacement, or at least a Hyman facsimile? Yeah, I think that's the long-term goal. But you got to keep your eyes open. You can never have enough talent. That's the end goal. That'll do it for today's edition of Locked On Oilers. If you could be so kind, please subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts, or if you're listening or watching over on YouTube, hit that subscribe button. Let me know any other moves that come to mind as far as Ekholm, Hyman elevating the Oilers from nice playoff team to Stanley Cup contender. I will talk to you guys tomorrow. Until then, let's go Oilers.